Forward. The world is in the throes of a new birth. A new pattern of culture is emerging. The ways of science have paved the way for the reorientation of human aims and goals. Though men are presently thinking in terms of better ways of existence for all and have been forced to conceive of life as a whole and not as for oneself and a few, yet the means and methods adopted for arriving at that goal or realization of the welfare state have not been satisfactory. Man muddles on with the rationality vowed for his growth. Yet it is a fact that man is in search of happiness. This happiness and peace of mind seem to be closely linked up. Man has to realize that he belongs to a great world, and not only of humanity, but also of other kinds and types of life, not only on this earth of ours, but also to other worlds. Science has been opening up the frontiers of our knowledge in these very vast directions. We have almost begun to enter into a greater world, but our minds are yet incapable of thinking on that scale, and indeed, we are incapable of adjusting to this modern world and the prospects it is offering. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆ ಜಗತ್ತಿಗೆ ಹೊಂದ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಇಫ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಅವರ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಟು ದ ಹೈಯರ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಕಮ್ ಇನ್ ಟ್ಯೂನ್ ಬೆಟರ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಇನ್ ದಿಸ್ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್. The fine tuning in this world makes it possible for us to kind of access the other worlds also. Man feels himself to be a greater being in reality, or at least capable of realizing himself in the world and fulfilling the demands of the body, life, and mind. His efforts in this direction has been continuous, and labor of extreme concentration has gone into his struggle to grow, to live, and to realize happiness in terms of the wants of his body. It is true that some mighty minds have held that all the search for happiness in the world by adapting the world to one's needs and happiness cannot avail, and the precariousness of the achievement is more to be known. True also indeed, they have counseled that in transitoriness of the happiness achieved, there can be no real happiness. So, any amount of transitory happiness will not give you permanent happiness. So, what we are now actually progressing towards is a state of permanent happiness. They have also held that very definition of illusion is precisely transitoriness of the happiness. So, illusion and the transitory nature of the happiness is also is what is called as a definition of illusion. The search for the eternal and the permanent happiness is the real search, and this entails the renunciation of the search for the transitory happiness or success. So, if you want to search for permanent happiness, you have to give up the search for transitory happiness. So, please understand this. If you want to entail the search for real happiness or permanent happiness or eternal happiness, you have to stop searching for the transitory happiness. The search for the external or the permanent happiness is the real search, and that entails the renunciation of the search for transitory happiness. So, Vairagya, what is Vairagya? Andre, Vairagya is nothing but cessation or what do you say? The renunciation of the search for temporary happiness is Vairagya. Vairagya is nothing but giving up the search for transitory happiness is Vairagya. That is another definition of Vairagya. Giving up the search for transitory happiness. In other words, if you are always in the search of true happiness or permanent happiness, you are always in the state of Vairagya. Because in that way, you have actually given up the search for temporary happiness or transitory happiness. Does it make sense? Arthayita Varun?
But that doesn't.
ಎರಡು ಸರ್ಚ್ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಿಟರಿ ಹ್ಯಾಪಿನೆಸ್ ಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಪರ್ಮನೆಂಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪಿನೆಸ್ ಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. When we start searching for the permanent happiness, we give up the search for the transitory happiness, and that is called as vairagya. ಸರಿನಾ? ಈಗ ಮದುವೆ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನ ಊಟ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತಾದ್ರೆ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಂಡಿ ತಿನ್ನೋದು ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಅದು ವೈರಾಗ್ಯ.
A long term goal.
ಆಯ್ತು ಹೇಳಪ್ಪ.
But that doesn't mean you would push it away, Allah. If it
You don't push it away. You don't push it away. What comes your way, you acknowledge it. You accept it. That's what you are doing. What comes your way by nature, you accept it and acknowledge it. But you don't go in search of it. That's all that you are not doing.
And you'd still enjoy it actually. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ ಬಂದಾಗ you still would enjoy it, so to
You
say.
will enjoy it in the context of the permanent happiness.
Hmm.
For example, if I were to just give you this, suppose you have a goal of what do you say, to accumulate, say, 1 lakh rupees. And now you have 1,000 rupees that you've got. Now that 1,000 rupees will not only give you happiness of the fact that you have 1,000 in your hand, but it will also give you satisfaction that part of that 1 lakh rupees is this 1,000 rupees. So you actually feel happiness from both the accounts, not just one account. Are you getting the point? That's how it actually enhances your happiness in life. So the happiness is not looked at in a transitory way. It is looked at both in the transitory way and in the eternal way. In other words, this transitory happiness is also viewed as part of the eternal happiness. So there are two components that you are actually enjoying, which is the reason why we say that spirituality actually enriches your life. Because you are actually getting two things for one thing. You got the point? Does it make any sense? So you're happy that you've got 1,000 rupees in your hand. That anyway is there. But apart from that, you're also partially feeling satisfied that this 1,000 rupees is part of that 1 lakh rupees that you're trying to accumulate. So part of the goal you have accumulated. So in that context, when you keep that the permanent happiness or the long-term goal in mind, that also adds to the happiness that you are now feeling or the satisfaction that you are feeling. Similar. Just to give a very practical day-to-day example. Similar. So, for example, everything that you do well in life actually makes you more happy if you keep the larger picture of the goal in front of you. Now, when you keep the larger picture of goal in front of you, and this activity is also taking you towards the goal, then you are actually having happiness from both these accounts. The work that you are doing now, but also in the context of the goal, it is actually taking you towards both these things. So, in other words, then what happens is every activity will cease to be an isolated activity. Every activity will then become part of that series of activities which will take you towards the goal. So, no activity is randomly done. It might appear to come to you as random, but everything is actually leading you towards the goal. That's how it's going to enrich your life. Got the point? So, life then is looked at as a wholesome journey. It is not looked at as in isolation. That is what happens. The outlook changes, outlook of life changes. Okay? However, man is not quite prepared for this renunciation of the transitory happiness, which according to him is in his hand, for the sake of permanent happiness, which is far off. Better the bondage of the immediate, if it is pleasant, than the freedom of the eternal, which needs renunciation of the immediate. ಯಾವಾಗ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳುದು ನೀವು ಮೆಡಿಟೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೋಗಿ ಯಾರಿಗಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ 20 ವರ್ಷ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ 30 ವರ್ಷ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು ಬರ್ಲಿ ಬಿಡಪ್ಪ ನಿಧಾನಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಪೀಪಲ್ ಸೇ ಓಕೆ ಲೆಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಕಮ್ ಇನ್ ಡ್ಯೂ ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಟೈಮ್. Until unless people are made to realize that the meditation will have a tangible here and now effect on their life, they will not feel inclined to come towards meditation. Serena. So too, the renunciation of the finiteness of the individuality is impossible because of the promise of the attainment of the infinite. Now, some souls come ready for the attainment of the infinite. For them, giving up the transitory happiness of the finite is okay. They come prepared. But it's not the case for everyone. Most of the people actually struggle. Surely, men have sought a different solution for wish fulfillment. They would like to realize the eternal in the temporal, the infinite in the finite, the unbounded in the bounded, spirit in the bosom of the matter, and so on, because of the double demand of the human nature for both the worlds. ಎರಡು ಬೇಕಲ್ವಾ? ಇದು ಬೇಕು ಅದು ಬೇಕು. ಯಾವುದು ಪ್ರೈಮಸಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀರಾ ಅದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್. ಮೊನ್ನೆ ನಾ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, one girl had come to the hospital with a suicidal attempt after loving somebody for nearly 15 years and not ready to give up this person. Now, what is she trying to do? Is that she is actually trying to find the eternal in the finite. This person is also finite. He is also temporal. But this girl seems to have that concept of infiniteness in this temporal. No, so she's actually ending up going towards suicide. In other words, you are trying to find the right thing in the wrong thing. When you try to find the right thing in the wrong thing, it always gives rise to wrong results. You got the point? So that's why we always need to have the right goal in front of us. Then it becomes easier for us to do the thing that we are actually talking about in terms of going towards the infinity. Serena. Sorry, this is a very common mistake. ಇದನ್ನು ಅಂಡರ್ಲೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. They would like to realize the eternal in the temporal, the infinite in the finite, the unbounded in the bound, the spirit in the bosom of the matter, and so on, because the double demand of the human nature for both the worlds. There have grown several philosophers which seek to do justice to the claims of man's desires and wishes here and yonder. That philosophies are governed by such desires and wishes is a fact that reveal the psychological roots of their thinking. Such thinking has not released itself from the goal-directed impulse, and rightly too, though it must be confessed that reality is not capable of being a goal until unless all happiness claim is dropped, whether it is of temporal and eternal. In reality, there is neither temporal happiness or permanent happiness. It is beyond happiness. So if you want to reach reality, you have to give up the concept of happiness. Okay, one commonly quoted sentence is happy is that person who is happy under all circumstances. That is a very commonly quoted quote. Happy is that person who is happy under all circumstances. Now, if you want to be happy under all circumstances, so you have to give up the idea of happiness. Then only you can be happy under all circumstances. If you hold on to the idea of happiness as we know, then there is no question of being happy all the time. Got the point? So, a person who is truly free is one who has given up the idea of freedom. One who has gone beyond the idea of freedom is truly free all the time. Because there is no question of having idea of freedom or the bondage. Then you are permanently free. Got the point? So these are two things that we normally talk about. Reality has a claim to be known for itself without the limitations and strictures of desire for any goal such as happiness, pleasure, or power. It is to be known as it is in itself and for itself. That is the law of one's real being and reality. Please underline this. Reality is to be known as it is in itself and for itself. That is the law of one's real being and reality. So you should know reality for the sake of reality, by reality only. You cannot want to know reality for the sake of something else. That is not admissible. Man feels his reality to be of paramount concern, and the realization of that reality is the basic impulse of his being. And happiness, pleasure, and power, and so on, are just means considered and surrendered on the march towards our own reality realization. So now he's talking about not soul realization, self realization. He's now talking about reality realization. He's not used this word many places, but underline that. Reality realization. It is nothing but Bhuma realization. The methods by which this reality consciousness is to be attained are of great antiquity and had varyingly fortunes just because of man's dual aims. It is only when one seeks oneself that one realizes one's reality, and not when one turns toward the world to realize oneself or oneself in it. So, as long as your mind is externally directed towards the world, there is no question of self realization or realizing oneself. Only when the mind is turned towards oneself, then you can actually realize the self. Several indeed has been the philosophies that imagined or built up the systems and have become incapable of showing the way to the reality consciousness. Again, reality realization and reality consciousness are two words that are being used that are not commonly used by Babuji at other places. I'm just looking at Varadacharya is the one who's written this commentary. So he's kind of used these special words: reality consciousness, reality realization, all these things. Nor was liberation achieved with their help. A return to the need for personal experience with the ultimate has become urgent, and most people tired of philosophies and logistics and so-called rationality are turning towards a method by which they would have the experience or intuition or realization of the essence of the being or existence. Experience or intuition or realization of the essence of the being of existence. ಏನಪ್ಪ?
On the reality consciousness, isn't reality much above consciousness?
Correct.
How
Now,
can
again, so I did not want to pick on that particular point. What you say is correct. You have to cross consciousness, you have to cross beyond the root or the seed of the consciousness, then you actually end up in reality. So, although they have used the word reality here, reality consciousness, but in reality, reality is above consciousness. That's the correct conceptualization. Okay, good that you actually picked on the subtle point. I did not want to end up on that particular point because um, I was not sure how many people actually will grasp that. First consciousness, then the seed or the root or root or the potentiality of the consciousness, then the reality. So in other words, you are way above consciousness in order to reach the reality. Same. So to use the word reality consciousness might not be the best use of the word or consciousness. It conveys a wrong meaning. People get confused by this word. There are, of course, some who do not think that the experience can solve any problems and believe that belief alone is the method or means of philosophies will be sufficient and personal experience is merely a lure or a mirage. So there are two people, groups of people, one who believe in experience, other one who believes in belief. With such thinkers, we of course do not agree and man has never agreed. True indeed, this personal experience should be of the highest and not merely a hallucinatory product of one's wishes and constructions. Mental projections, so to speak, are not reality. So it should not be imagination. That's why we say at the start, from the first day of meditation, what do we say? No imagination. Because if you want to go towards reality, it's the opposite of imagination. If you are imagining all the time, you will never go towards reality. Okay? Hallucination is the projection of one set of illusions in the place of those it is said to replace, namely the experience of nature. So hallucination just replaces some other part of the experience of the nature. The evolution of mind into a higher consciousness or reality is indeed our endeavor, and this evolution can no longer be achieved through the old patterns suitable to lower species and forms of life, including man. The growth of cosmic consciousness or an intuition that can grasp all in one sweep of consciousness rather than in fragments, or that which will integrate all knowledge and perceive the integral reality, is a divine gift and cannot be expected to be attained through natural means of mere aspiration. No, so please underline this. So the
ಇದೆಲ್ಲ
growth
ನಮ್ಮ
of
ಬುಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ.
uh,
ಸಾರಿ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಬುಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಇಲ್ಲ.
oh, ಇದಿಲ್ವೇ ಇಲ್ವಾ? Oh, they have cut it
This
off, huh?
directly starts with maximum one.
Oh, but it's a very good elaboration actually. He was actually professor of interreligious studies. Varadasari was a Vishishtadvaita practitioner, Acharya. So he was like an Aingari, Vishishtadvaita practitioner, and he was a professor of interreligious studies in Tirupati University. That was his qualification. So before he comes to Babuji, he had lot of aham of him. When you say what was the proudness of his uh, studies that he had
Knowledge.
accomplished. Then there's a big metamorphosis from what he is to what he becomes eventually. So anyway, so the growth of cosmic consciousness or an intuition that can grasp everything in one sweep of consciousness rather than in fragments, or that which will integrate all knowledge and perceive the integral reality is a divine gift and cannot be expected to be achieved by mere aspiration. Science expects this to happen in natural evolution through man's infinite capacity to adapt to the environment to his needs and also to rouse within himself the powers and capacities latent in a sense, such as rationality, intelligence, instinct, will, consciousness itself, and creative imagination, cooperative activity, and social unity. So science has all these paths: the path of intellect, path of intelligence, instinct, will, path of consciousness, path of creative imagination, path of cooperative activity, path of social unity. None of it is actually is going to take you to the goal of integral reality. However, the ascent of life is marked by breaks, and one wonders whether these breaks or leaps are due to an innate force or elan, or an upward force that has leaned towards it to pull it up. Religious experience in man reveals this leaning of the cosmic consciousness or divine and transcendental grace consciousness towards it. Thus, in man, this conjunction of the divine and the human is made possible for the first time in evolution. So now he's talking about two conceptions: the conception of the divine and the human. They come together in man. But a jump to the ultimate consciousness or being is a long way off. And the natural evolution of man will reveal that in his life, the incidence of force much vaster or superior to himself takes its hand. So we all experience it. There are so many aspects that we feel that's beyond our capability, beyond the force that we are capable of doing it. So many hands seem to play a part in our life, and we are not sure which hands are playing a part in our life. This is the beginning of spirituality. The self confronts its own deepest urge to be this urge towards the ultimate reality, without which its own future is impossible and unattainable. So the urge of the self is to go towards the ultimate. That's all. That is the urge to go towards the ultimate is the urge of the self. This is the call to knowledge of the self, to fulfillment, to perfection, to ultimate happiness, and to bliss. Above all, to the feelings and realization of the reality of oneself, which seems to be slipping away in its own original nature. The seers of India had long ago seen this necessity for the help of the highest and the ultimate spirit for lifting man to higher levels of consciousness and awareness, such as superconsciousness and absolute consciousness or experience. Supermind belongs to the region of the level very much above the human mental and overmental. There are levels of being such as Pindanda, Brahmanda, Parabrahmanda, and the highest transcendent, which is called by Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur as the central region and the center. Indeed, we can reveal the parallels between these and the words described as Bohu, Bhuvar, Swaha, Swar, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, and Satyam. ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ ಗಾಯತ್ರಿ ಮಂತ್ರ ಅವತ್ತು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ ಏಳು ಲೋಕ ಅದನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕಾನ್ಷಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಟ್ ಈಚ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಈಸ್ ಹೈಯರ್ suited to the plane of its being and goes through modifications or twists and limitations when it descends lower and is said to form the several centers or granthis that distribute the power of consciousness according to the laws of centers which emerge as and when the center forms. The yoga of self-realization demands that the approach to the highest state beyond all the levels of consciousness and beings. The question arises whether this is possible, whether it is not a gradual process of ascent which enables man to proceed from the level of man to a level of superman with a supermind and so on till the highest level is reached. This is the second question. Is the journey gradual or is the journey immediate or pretty fast? There is much to be said in favor of the gradual theory of evolution. The immediate possibility of arriving at the highest level is also open to the human soul that has become aware of the urgency of the attainment and existence. So, one soul which has become aware of the urgency of the attainment and existence, it proceeds very fast towards the center or towards the reality. This is what Sri Ramchandraji assures as possible, and by the yoga directed by one who has attained that ultimate central reality, it is positively easy. Evolution of the individual becomes swift even while in the human body, which is purified by the highest consciousness or power and transformed in every one of its cells. So, not only we transform in terms of our spiritual existence, we also transform at the level of the mind and the body, physical body. So please remember that. So all the three gets transformed once we get in touch with the reality. The power of the highest can descend thus into the human heart and begin to purify and lead it to the highest state. This is what we do. Every time you take a sitting, the power of the highest descends into the heart and then it begins to purify and lead it to the highest state. The human frame itself is so made to receive the transmission of the highest energy or Shakti divine at several centers corresponding to the cosmic centers or the supercosmic regions. The human body, thus being purified in its nervous, circulatory, and other system, can enjoy or experience the peace and the power and the transcendence even in this body. The need and the process are really to be trained by an adept in this Raja Yoga path. Sri Ramchandraji Maharaj, in this book entitled The Commentary on the 10 Maxims of Sajmarg, elucidates the conditions which are necessary for realizing the ultimate. They are maxims which one must follow implicitly. They are not merely orders arbitrarily given, but clearly explained in order to show their rationality in respect to the goal that has to be achieved. They are, of course, easy to follow when there is an enormous earnestness to reach the goal or the ultimate. The simple formula of prayer gives us our objective in this search. It is God who is the All Master and who is the only person who can lead us to the destination. Our wishes interfere with our reaching the destination and are prapti viruddhis, are enemies of our attainment. Prapti means attainment, viruddhis means enemies. Surrender to God, who is the power omnipotent, is the essential need, for God is both the means and the end. The master who leads us to the highest is one who is in so much absorbed in the ultimate that he is, as it were, God in descent towards the soul that seeks and strives and struggles for help. So, master is nothing but God in human form because he's established his connection with the ultimate so deeply. The ancient methods of practice are beautifully explained, showing the rationality of worship and meditation at the Sandhya or the conjunctions of the day, morning, noon, and evening. The angas of the yoga are also neatly expounded, and the natural method of spiritual adaptation and adjustment to the goal is given in a simple and straightforward manner. The purification of the system by the subtle process of transmission by the master is an achievement that can find no parallel in the spiritual history in recent times. So please underline this. The purification of the system by the subtle process of transmission by the master is an achievement that can find no parallel in the spiritual history in recent times. To live in God, for God, and by God is the burden of the path of Saj Marg, and this naturally leads to the realization of one's reality in God for God. So too, one becomes harmonious with all without any distinctions. The higher worlds open up to one who has become one with God by living in Him and for Him alone. Spirituality is not like religion, just a form of worship or technique to be observed. It is a living in the awareness of God and in His essence. Sri Ramchandraji points out how the individual soul, by following the maxims of Sahajma, can even at the first contact come to experience the peace that passeth understanding and then grows in this peace towards the highest possible to man. Liberation or moksha is something that naturally follows from this practice. Perfection too may be open to one who is divinely directed. There is little amount of metaphysics or physics in the exposition, which is not very important to discuss as it will become clear as one proceeds on with the Abhyasa. There is no doubt that there must be complete transformation of human's nature, and he must be taken up for guidance by the cosmic and the supracosmic nature, so super cosmic nature, so that his attainment may be felt to be more and more reality. As one approaches the center or the ultimate, one increases in his reality, and all that went before appears to be more and more unreality. However, the Abhyasi's aim is to gain this increasing reality that arises as one begins to get nearer to the center. Sri Ramchandri discovers in this realm, Sri Ramchandri's discoveries in this realm are remarkable for their dynamic practical nature. God is not far and distant, but very near and ready, means Siddhapaya, Siddhopaya, and man has but to turn towards him to feel his presence and his power of transformation. We owe it to Sri Ramchandraji of Fatehgarh for making this experience possible to all, and to Sri Ramchandraji of Shahjahanpur for spreading this gospel of redemption and transformation by demonstrating it practically to whomsoever turned towards him. This book is, in a sense, for the advanced practitioner, but it's a very illuminating book which should be read after the study of Master's reality at dawn and efficacy of Raja Yoga. ಸರಿನಾ ಬಟ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಎಫಿಕಸಿ ಆಫ್ ರಾಜಯೋಗ ಓದಿಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನ ಎಗರಿಸಿ ಇದು ಓದ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಸರಿನಾ ನಾವು ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ So if we do get some references to efficacy of Raj Yoga, we'll actually cover that also where necessary. Sarina? So before we go to the maxim, I'll just read one word by Babuji. In this book, I have endeavored to put up in words those spiritual secrets which have up till now come down from heart to heart. But since they relate to direct perception, which depends upon the study of nature and can be revealed by means of vibrations, it is not only difficult but almost impossible to express them adequately in words. True love cannot be expressed by words. This is the very reality which is inexplicable in any way. In this respect, I may therefore say that it is proper for the readers to try to reach up to the real spirit, ignoring the defects of expression and language, and be profited and help others to be profited by it as well. Ramchandra, December 8, 1946. ಸರಿ, ಫೋರ್ವರ್ಡ್ ಆಯಿತು, ಬಾಬುಜಿದ್ ಒಂದು ವರ್ಡ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಎನಿ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ದಿಸ್? ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನೀವು ಭಾಷೆ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ವರದಾಚಾರ್ಯ ಭಾಷೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕ್ಲಿಷ್ಟವಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ಲಿಲ್ವಾ?
ಏನಂತ? ಸಾರಿ.
ಕ್ಲಿಷ್ಟ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಪ್ರಿಟಿ ವಾಟ್ ಯು ಸೇ ಕಾಂಪ್ಲಿಕೇಟೆಡ್, ಟಫ್, because there are a lot of words which are used. Sometimes if you are not able to follow English pretty well, you seem to get lost somewhere. So people who are reasonably okay with English, they find reasonably okay. So you should have read higher English, then it's much easier. If you have just read English as a second language, then sometimes it might be tougher to grasp some of the language that he uses. So, ಸರಿ, ವರುಣ್, ಸನತ್, ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆಯಪ್ಪ? ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ವೈಟ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಇವತ್ತು.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಏನಿಲ್ಲ.
ವರುಣ್ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿಲ್ಲ. ವರುಣ್ ಮಗಳನ್ನ ಪಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆಟ ಆಡ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು.
ಅವಳು ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾಳೆ.
ನಂಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತು ಅವಳಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತಿರ್ತಾಳೆ ಅಂತ.
ಅವಳು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಲು, ಇದು ಇವ್ರು ಅವತ್ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ ಅವರೇನಾ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಿದ್ಲು.
ಅವಳು ಗುರ್ತಿಡಿಯಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದಾಳ, ಅವರೇನೆ. ಹಲೋ, ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಪುಟ್ಟಿ? ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಯಾ? ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಯಾ? ಸಂತನ್ಗೆ ಪ್ರತಿ ಸತಿ ಬುಕ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ಅವಳು ಸಾಥ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾಳೆ.
ಹಾ, ಅವಳು ಫುಲ್ ಒಂದ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅಡಿಕ್ಷನ್ ತರ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ದಾಳೆ.
ಗುಡ್. ಸನತ್ ಕುಮಾರ್
ಗುರ್ತಿಡಿತಾಳೆ, ಮಾಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲಾರ್ದು ಗುರ್ತಿಡಿತಾಳೆ.
ಸನತ್ ಕುಮಾರ ಮಲ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿಯೇನೋ? IBM ಹೋಗಿ ಒಂಚೂರು ಮಗ ತೋರ್ಸೋ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ. ಎದ್ದಿದ್ಯಾ? ನಿದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಯಾ? ಏನ್ ತೂಗುಡಿಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಯಾ? ಹಾ, ಓ ಇದೇನಿದು ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಶೇವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ಯಾ? ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಮೀಸೆ ಗೀಸೆ ಗಡ್ಡ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಶೇವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ಯಾ? ಸರಿ, ಗುಡ್. ಸೊ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಎಷ್ಟೊತ್ತು ಮಲ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀಯಾ?
10:30, 10:45.
ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 10 ನಿಮಿಷ ಮುಗಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಮಲ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. 10:30 ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ, ಸರಿನಾ? ಸರಿ, 10 ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಪುಸ್ತಕ? ನಾಗೇಂದ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ನಾವು
ಇಲ್ಲ.
ನೀವು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ತಗೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ವರ್ಕ್ಸ್. ನೀನು ಭಾನುವಾರ ನೋಡ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ನಿನ್ನ?
ಇಲ್ಲ, ಈ ವೀಕ್ ಬಂದಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನು.
ಅದೇನೆ, ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ, ಎಲ್ಲೂ ಕಾಣಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ವರುಣ್ ಹತ್ರ ಇದೆ ಬುಕ್, ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಹತ್ರ ಇದೆ. ಆಗ ನೀನು 10 ಮ್ಯಾಗ್ ಇದು ತಗೋಬೇಕಷ್ಟೇ ಪುಸ್ತಕ. ನೀವು ಹೋದಾಗ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ವರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ 1 ಬಾಬುಜಿ, ಅದು ನೀನು ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಹೋದಾಗ ತಗೋ ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಭಾನುವಾರ, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸಂಡೇ, ಸರಿನಾ? ಸರಿ, ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು 2-3 ಪೇಜ್ ಆದ್ರೂ ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮಮ್ ಬಂದು ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ, ಸರಿನಾ? Rise before dawn and offer your prayer and meditation at a fixed hour, preferably completing them before sunrise. Have a separate place and seat for meditation. As far as possible, develop the habit of sitting in one and the same pose. Give special attention to purity of the body and the mind. ಒಂದೇ ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಒನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಬಿಗ್ಗೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮ್ಸ್ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ. ಸೋ ಮೆನಿ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ದೇರ್. ಆಯ್ತು. The fire of the divine, which has been burning since the beginning of time, has not yet cooled down. When the time of creation came, the latent thought came into action and the subtlest particles got heated up. ಈಗ ಸಟ್ಲೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸಕ್ಕೆ. ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಅಂಡರ್ಲೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. ಅದು ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಲೈನ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ವೆನ್ ದ ಟೈಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಷನ್ ಕೇಮ್, ದ ಲೇಟೆಂಟ್ ಥಾಟ್ ಕೇಮ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಆಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದ ಸಟ್ಲೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಗಾಟ್ ಹೀಟೆಡ್ ಅಪ್. Thus, the preliminary covering set in from the very first day. The first covering is the covering of the separateness, idea of separateness. Then the anxiety, then desire. By the effect of the continuous heating, the particles began to come into motion. So latent particles ಇತ್ತು, ಆ ಸಟ್ಲೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಹೀಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಯ್ತು. ಹೀಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ದಂಗೆ ಇಟ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಮೋರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್, ಸೋ ಟು ಸೇ. ಸರಿ, its intensity went on increasing, adding wheel after wheel to it. Grossness began to develop by the effect of the growing intensity of the vibrations. The action of every particle started and went on multiplying till the reality was completely wrapped up within, like a silkworm in the cocoon. In other words, only the white shell of the egg remained open to view, while the reality within was lost to sight. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಕೂಡ ಬರೀ ಸಟಲೆಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಮಲ್ಟಿಪ್ಲೈ ಆಗಿ ಆಗಿ ಅದರ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗಿ ಆಗಿ. ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಹೇಳೋದಾಯ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಸುಸುರ್ ಬತ್ತಿ ತಗೊಳ್ತೀರಾ ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ. ಸುಸುರ್ ಬತ್ತಿ ತಗೊಂಡು ನೀವು ಆಟ ಆಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಸುಸುರ್ ಬತ್ತಿ ಹೊಡಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಆಟ ಆಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಗಾಳಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಲ್ವಾ, ಗಾಳಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಏನೇನೋ ಶೇಪ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ನೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ? ಆ ಶೇಪ್ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ರಿಯಾಲಿಟಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಆದರೆ ವಿತಿನ್ 1 or 2 minutes ದಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ ಇಸ್ ಗಾನ್. ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾ? Something very similar. But now suppose you take up that shape and start thinking that that is permanently present. What is transitory, now you are only putting your own reality into it and saying that it is going to be permanently present. Then what happens? The grossness forms. Because you have added energy to that transitory experience, and so the grossness forms. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಇದನ್ನೇ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಾಂಟೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಅನುಭವ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಚಿಂತೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಡೋಂಟ್ ಗೋ ಬಿಹೈಂಡ್ ಎ ಥಾಟ್, ಡೋಂಟ್ ಗೋ ಬಿಹೈಂಡ್ ಅನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್. ಅಂಡ್ ಇಫ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಗೋ ಬಿಹೈಂಡ್ ಎ ಥಾಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್, ಇಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ goal directed or self-limiting. For a particular reason you are going, not otherwise. Otherwise, you will end up performing more and more samskaras by thinking about the experience again and again. ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆಯಾ? ಸೊ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಿಮಿಲರ್ ಟು ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಡೂ. ಸೊ ಆ ಸುಸುರ್ ಬತ್ತಿನ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಏನೋ ಶೇಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನ ಆ ಶೇಪ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಪರ್ಮನೆಂಟು ಅಂತ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತು ಅಂತ ಐಡಿಯಾ, ಆವಾಗ ದಟ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ಸ್ ಎ ಗ್ರಾಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಆರ್ ಎ ಕವರಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಮೈಂಡ್. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಸಿಮಿಲರ್ ಟು ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಡೂ ವಿತ್ ಅವರ್ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರಸ್. We go on forming samskaras because we go on adding reality to the thinking and the emotions that we feel and to the experience that we undergo. When we add energy to these three things, the experience, the emotion and the thinking, that becomes grossness. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? Suppose if you don't add energy at all ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ, of course you will pass through the experience, but that will not leave any strong impression on you. ಸರಿನಾ? ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಯಾರು ಇಬ್ರು ಜಗಳ ಆಡಿ ಒಂದು ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಕೇಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಅವ್ನು ಯಾರೋ ವಿಂಗ್ ಕಮಾಂಡರ್ ಅಂತ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಏರ್ ಫೋರ್ಸ್, ಅವನು ಇನ್ಯಾರು ಹೊಡೆದು ಅವ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಂಪ್ಲೇಂಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಅವ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಂಪ್ಲೇಂಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ. ನೆನ್ನೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆಯಿಂದ ಟಿವಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ ಅದೇ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, CCTV ಕ್ಯಾಮೆರಾ ಫುಟೇಜ್.
No, what the IAS officer has told is fake actually. IAS officer complaint kotti that false.
Wing commander.
So the point what I'm trying to make is that fellow, ಆ ಹುಡುಗ ಯಾರಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, they wanted to let go of it. It's a small incident, why actually give complaint ಅಂತ. ಆ ಹುಡುಗ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಹೊಡ್ಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ನಿಗೇನು ಕಂಪ್ಲೇಂಟ್ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. This wing commander made a big issue out of it. Although he was at fault, he went and gave the complaint. And you know what both are now doing? What are they doing? They are paying attention to the same experience again and again. What are they doing?
Grossness.
Grossness create ಮಾಡಿ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರಗಳು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರ ಋಣಾನುಬಂಧ.
What would have gone off just as a passing incident, now becomes something very binding on both of their lives because of the energy that they are paying to this particular experience. It becomes grossness, it becomes a samskara, and it now actually changes the course of their life. So for the next few years or the few months, they'll be running around behind this affair. They'll be running around behind the case. ಇದೆಲ್ಲವೂ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಹೋಗಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಕೊಂಡಂಗಾಯ್ತು.
Also, the fact that it'll run for a long time because they have made it a bigger issue.
ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್,
ಅದು ಭೋಗಕ್ ಬರ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಲಾಂಗ್ ಟೈಮ್ ರನ್ ಆಗ್ಲೇಬೇಕು.
ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಯು ಶುಡ್ ನಾಟ್ make any big deal of anything in life. Then the samskaras that you form will be very, very minimal. Serena. Even if you make a big deal of a big deal, that also creates a lot of samskaras. Suppose you win the World Cup and Titkul, and you say that you celebrate for the next 1 week. That creates samskaras. You have made a big deal of a big event. That creates grossness. It doesn't matter
This
whether the
is
issue is big or small. If you actually unnecessarily go on paying energy to it and make it more stronger and stronger, it does become a samskara or grossness. That's all it is.
this is also what people use for manifestation, Allah. That they give a lot of energy to something of a particular feeling. ಅವ್ರು ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಗೆದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ ಫೀಲಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅವ್ರು ಇದ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಭೋಗಕ್ ಬರ್ಲೇಬೇಕು. Lot of people use that
So
for flight
manifestation,
experience.
manifestation through the experience through the utilization of the mental apparatus requires a lot of energy. Manifestation from the level of the subtle, the spiritual level, requires very minimal energy. That's the difference. Manifestation from the level of the mind requires a lot of energy. And that creates a lot of samskaras. That's the reason why the mind becomes dull. When somebody uses mesmerism or hypnotism for manifestation, it makes the mind dull. But if they're actually utilizing the spiritual realm for the manifestation, it makes the mind very light and expanded. That's the difference. So manifestation can be done from both levels. And ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ಮ್ಯಾನಿಫೆಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ ತಂದಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ತುಂಬಾ ದೇ ಬಿಕಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಇನ್ ಇಟ್. ಮ್ಯಾನಿಫೆಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ನಾನು ಬೇಕಾದ್ದು ನಾನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ಲೈಫಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಟಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಅಬೌಟ್. ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೋರ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಎ ಮೆಂಟಲ್ ಮ್ಯಾನಿಫೆಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಎ fulfillment of a particular desire. But what you are talking about here is a spiritual manifestation. That is only for the sake of the big desire, the original desire, which is to go towards the goal, and that requires very little energy. Anyway, so anyway, now one who was more closely attached to it received more of it for his share. In other words, only the white shell of the egg remained open to view, while the reality within was lost to sight. Co-relationship began to spring up. One who was more closely attached to it received more of it for his share. The heat which existed on the first day manifested itself in man, and gradually it went on developing, assuming the form of organic growth. Every particle gets affected thereby, absorbing its due share of it. A material change was thus introduced into it, and it remained subject to the influence of that which is what part of. The bigger layer previously formed by the heat maintained its connection with it. Now the influence caused by the greater thing will naturally be reflected on the smaller thing, which will then get affected thereby in proportion to its magnitude. Now he's talking about the heat. So original heat ಇತ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಮೊದಲನೇ ದಿವಸ ಏನು ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಆದಾಗ ಅದು ಹೀಟ್ ಮನುಷ್ಯನಲ್ಲಿ ಡಿಸೆಂಡ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಆ ಡಿಸೆಂಡ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಟ್ ಹೀಟ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ಗ್ರೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್. ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ದೇ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ಮಿಂಗ್ ಮೋರ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರಸ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಟ್ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಹೀಟ್. All things being subjected to external influences are affected by the rays of the sun in accordance with their capacity. The heat produced by external causes begin to exhaust itself after some time, and the real comfort comes only when it gets completely exhausted. So artificially heat create ಆಯಿತು, ಆ ಹೀಟ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ವಿ ಫೀಲ್ ಕಂಫರ್ಟ್. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬ ಡೇ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಸಿಲಿರುತ್ತೆ, ರಾತ್ರಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೂಲ್ ಆಗಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ವಿ ಫೀಲ್ ಕಂಫರ್ಟ್, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದ ಹೀಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಸ್ಟೆಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್, ಸೋ ಟು ಸೆ. ಸರಿನಾ? ಹೀಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಸ್ಟ್ ಆದಾಗ ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ದಟ್ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಅಸ್ ರಿಲೀಫ್. Take the case of summer season. When the effect of the external heat, which reduces after some time, is thoroughly removed, some comfort or ease is definitely felt and experienced. Obviously, ನಾವು ಸಮ್ಮರ್ ಸೀಸನ್ನೇ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಅದನ್ನೇ ಬಾಬುಜಿ ಅವರು ಬೆಳೀತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸರಿನಾ? Now the time when the external heat begins to subside, yielding place for a cooler effect to settle in, or the meeting point between the two, is known as Sandhigati. And this is the opinion of the Mahatmas, is the time best suited for the practice of Sandhya and Upasana. This is the time of the advent of that which is opposed to heat, and it can be that only alone which existed prior to the generation of heat at the time of creation, which is in close conformity with nature, or in other words, the very image of the ultimate state we have to finally arrive at. Thus, the point we start from is the very point which corresponds closely with the destination. ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಏನು ಲಿಂಕಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ? ಹೀಟ್ ಮುಗೀತು, ಹೀಟ್ ಮುಗಿದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ಬರುತ್ತೆ? ಹೀಟ್ ಮುಗಿದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ವಾಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರಯರ್ ಟು ದ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಹೀಟ್, what was existing in creation, what was existing prior to the generation of the heat, the ultimate or the center. So when you meditate at the Sandhikala, when the heat begins to subside and something else takes over its place, what is that something? It is the ultimate only in a different form. So by meditating at that junction where the night and the day come together, you are actually utilizing or directly relating yourself to the ultimate. That is what you are doing. ಸೊ ನಾರ್ಮಲಿ ನಾವೇನು ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಹೀಟ್ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಹೀಟ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೂಲ್ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ವಿ ರಿಲೇಟ್ ಟು ದ ಕೂಲ್ನೆಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಅಟ್ಮಾಸ್ಫಿಯರ್, ಇನ್ ಅವರ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಅಟ್ಮಾಸ್ಫಿಯರ್. But what Babaji is trying to say is that not only you relate to the coolness in the atmosphere, you also relate to that condition which was there prior to the onset of this heat in the start of creation. ಈ ಫಿಲಾಸಫಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಕ್ರಿಯೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಹೀಟ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಸ್ಟಿರ್ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಹೀಟ್ ಬರಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಆಯಿತು. ಲೇಟೆಂಟ್ ಮೋಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಷನ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಅಂತ ಥಾಟ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಆವಾಗ ಹೀಟ್ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಏನಿತ್ತು? ಹೀಟ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಏನಿತ್ತು? ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಇತ್ತು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೀಟ್ ಬರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಏನಿತ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೀಟ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿ ಹೀಟ್ಗಿಂತ ಮುಂಚಿನ ಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಏನಿತ್ತು ಅದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನತಾಯ್ತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಕೂಲ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಎರಡನೇದು ಯು ವಿಲ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಬಿ ಇನ್ ಟ್ಯೂನ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ultimate which was there prior to the heat. So when we meditate at the junction between the day and night, we are actually being in tune with that ultimate, which is one principle of nature. That is what you are trying to do. ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆಯಾ? So some of the concepts in 10 maxims alla, it takes a bit of time to understand. So we will go slow, and whatever you are not able to understand, you please elaborate on that. ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೇಳಿ. ಈ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಯಾಕೆ ಸಂಧಿಗತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಏನ್ರಿ ವರುಣ್, ಏನೋ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಾ? ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಆಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ, ಹೀಟ್ ಬರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಏನಿತ್ತು ಆ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಸಂಧಿ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ರಿಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಮೊದಲು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ? ಕೂಲ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಂತ ಅನುಭವ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಜುಯಲಿ ಆಸ್ ವಿ ಮೂವ್ ಡೀಪರ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಅವರ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, ವಿ ಲೆಟ್ ಗೋ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಕೂಲ್ನೆಸ್. ವಿ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಬಾದರ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಕೂಲ್ನೆಸ್. Once we go into ourselves, why will we actually worry about coolness or heat in the outside environment? We become in tune with the ultimate, which was the condition before the start of the heat of the creation. So that actually helps you to align to one principle of nature. What is the principle of nature? It takes you back to that state where we started prior to the creation, prior to the heat of creation. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಧಿ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಸರಿನಾ? ಈಗ 3 ಸಂಧಿ ಕಾಲ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಸಂಧಿ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಡಿಟೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಮುಂದೆ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಇದೆ, ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನ ಇದೆ, ಸಾಯಂಕಾಲ ಇದೆ. ನಾವು ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಪ್ರಾತಃ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ, ಮಾಧ್ಯಮಿಕ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸಾಯಂ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವಂದನ. ಸೇಮ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾನೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾ ವಂದನ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದು. ಸಂಧ್ಯೆಗೆ ವಂದನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾ ವಂದನ. ವಂದನ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ಗೋ ಮಾಡೋದು, ವಂದನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಬಿ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಫುಲ್ ಟು ದ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾಸ್.
ಈ ಜನರಲಿ ಪ್ರೇಯರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ವೈ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಅಥವಾ ಈವ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡೋದು? ಆಫ್ಟರ್ನೂನ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಯಾರು ಪ್ರೇ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ಜನರಲಿ?
ಅದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಆಫ್ಟರ್ನೂನ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಪೆಷಲ್ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ ಬೇಕು. ಆ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ನೂನ್ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಬೋದು.
ಆಕ್ಚುಲ್ ರೀಸನ್ ಏನು?
ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ನಲ್ಲಯ್ಯ. ಇದೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮಮ್ ಒಂದಲ್ಲೇ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ತಾಳ್ಮೆ ಇರು. ಸಂಧ್ಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ, 3 ಸಂಧ್ಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಯಾರು ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನದ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ್ನ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡೋಣ. ಆವಾಗ ಈ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಸರಿನಾ? 3 ಸಂಧ್ಯೆ ಇದೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನದ ಸಂಧ್ಯೆ ಇವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಲೈಫ್ ಸ್ಟೈಲ್ ಹೆಂಗಾಗೋಗಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನದ ಸಂಧ್ಯೆಯನ್ನ ಯಾರು ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬಿಡಲ್ಲ. ನೋಡು, ನಾವು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕುರಾನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುಕ್ರವಾರ ಆಸಾನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ ಟೈಮ್. ಅದೇ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಓನ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ, ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಬಿಡಲ್ಲ ಆಫೀಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಆಫೀಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕೊಠಡಿ ಓಪನ್ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದು, ಮಧ್ಯಾಹ್ನದ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದು ಅಲ್ವಾ?
ಎಲ್ಲ ಪಂಜೆ ಉಟ್ಕೊಂಡು
ಅಲ್ಲ, ಪಂಚೆನೆ ಉಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕಂತ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಂಗೆ ಪ್ಯಾಂಟ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡೆ ಸಂಧ್ಯಾವನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು, ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿದೆ?
ರಿಚುವಲ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ದ ವೇ ಇಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಡ್. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಉಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆಫೀಸ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ.
ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಔಟ್ ವೈ ಸಮಟೈಮ್ಸ್ we don't actually give importance to our own things rather than we worry about other people's things. So that's a very interesting thing. Seripa. So we'll stop